Hello, everyone, and thank you, Michael, for the introduction. I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks to the Q as well for setting this up every year and giving us a chance to gather and share knowledge on a really good topic. I'm loving that I have the chance to talk to you about Cypress component testing and about making things simpler in your day-to-day work with shifting your testing focus to an earlier point. First of all, just to let you know that the slides are available in a dark and a light theme as well, and you can follow the links given here to each variant. And to introduce myself, my name is Miloš Ivanović. I'm a QA engineer for Alas, a company from Novi Sad, Serbia, and I focus on accessibility testing specifically, with a recent foray into Python programming, which I'm quite liking. I'm a white male in, sorry for that slide. I'm a white male in early 30s with short brown hair and short beard and mustache. Currently wearing a gray-blue sweater with my X t-shirt underneath because it's gotten a bit chilly. To have a look at a couple of terms and definitions we'll be covering during this talk. So basically we have two sides of the story. One is the Axe tools. Here we have Axe Core as the open source accessibility basically brains behind the operation of accessibility testing. This is used in Google's Lighthouse, this is used in Axe developer tools, and this is the core engine that will be running all of our accessibility tests. From there, we have the new offering of the Axe Developer Hub, a subscription-based platform that takes your reports, or rather takes the data from your accessibility tests and generates reports that you can easily verify, show to your stakeholders, and get clean information from. The tool actually doing the data gathering and forwarding it to the developer hub is the Axe Watcher. This is a code component which plugs into your testing infrastructure and forwards everything to the developer hub to show. On the other side, we have Cypress. Cypress is a testing framework working in JavaScript. It has a slight of a gimmick that it runs inside of a browser, which acts as a limitation in terms of languages it can use. It can only be written in JavaScript and TypeScript, but it gives you the familiar surroundings of a browser window and of browser dev tools. A sub-component or a sub-method of testing done through Cypress is Cypress Component Testing. This is, on the contrary to typical end-to-end tests which load web pages, this isolates your specific elements. So if you want to render a button, if you want to render a drop-down, you don't have to load a full web page, go to a full user flow. You can isolate specific elements and target them in isolation. Another tool to plug into this with the accessibility testing capabilities and with including the Axe Core into Cypress is the Cypress Axe plugin, which we'll be integrating through to the testing structure here. Basically, the first part of this session does go over a couple of technical themes on setting up Cypress testing and Cypress Axe plugin on one end and the Axe Core Watcher on the other. Just to give you an overview, even for the non-technical folks here, how simple this is to actually implement and to bring into your team and workflow. Both tools, both the Cypress and the Axe Watcher, have an interactive setup guide that carries you through the process. And Cypress component testing focuses on all of the larger JavaScript frameworks that are currently out there: React, Angular, Vue.js, Next. And there is also good community support for newer developments like Lit and Quick. So to start the setup process, we would install the Cypress package from npm and just run its interactive setup. From here on, we get a window that guides us through each step of the way. On the right-hand side, there will be screenshots which cover what I'm talking about regarding the steps, so I won't be describing them specifically because it is the same flow. And here it is shown the two ways of doing testing through Cypress, basically between end-to-end and component testing. We would choose component testing for this. From there, Cypress detects the existing front-end frameworks and their bundlers in your project, and you get the chance to choose and pinpoint what you want exactly. On the next step, Cypress actually verifies if all of the necessary components are installed to your project, and gives you instructions on how to fill in the missing blanks. With this completed, you have all of the requirements checked, and the Cypress tool does the next step of generating its under the hood files, basically. So there is a list of files shown here that have been generated by the tool at this moment, and some description into what each of those does. And these will be the files which we will be adding a bit of code to in our following steps. From there, you have the offering of a browser. And here on out, you're looking at the structure of a typical test run. So we've completed the setup, and this is where we'll start at each subsequent test run. Choosing the browser, basically Cypress detects what you have installed on your machine at the moment of running the tool. So with the case of a MacBook, you would have a Safari here, and with the case of a CI/CD solution, you would get different browsers listed as well. And this is how the initial window of the Cypress test runner looks like. Here we will see we will have listed out individual component tests in the next steps, and this is the page we will be coming back to during the consequent flow runs, test runs. With Cypress setup, now we are adding the accessibility part to it. So installing the Cypress X plugin and Xcore and importing them to, or rather importing the plugin to the specific file noted here, which is one of those under the hood Cypress engine files. Another step needed for the execution is having the X capabilities injected into each test. So this is a code segment that would be added to a test. In a case of a web page, the inject X command should trigger after visiting a web page. In our case, with the component testing, it's triggered after having the component rendered. One important thing to note here regarding the accessibility checks in Cypress, you have the option of picking the exact point in time where you want to trigger the check. This gives you a bit more responsibility, but it also gives you much more precise control. So for example, if you are targeting certain issues that are hiding behind a sequence of actions over a component or behind a certain condition, you can reach that condition, assert that you have reached it, and then trigger the check. There are also a couple of things to think about with Cypress component testing in regards to end-to-end testing in comparison. Due to not having the full page rendered, not having the full flow, there are some accessibility rules that are not relevant for the individual components. For example, when you render a button, it will alert you that it doesn't have an H1 heading, for example. But those options that are not relevant with our use cases can be turned off either at the moment of calling the check accessibility function or at the global level in one of those Cypress under the hood files. Now, this slide shows what the test execution looks like. We have on one end the Cypress events log, which shows exactly which actions have been taken and which assertions have been made on the visible elements. And on the right-hand side, the rendered elements themselves. In this case, the test is passing because there was an interaction and the component reacted accordingly and everything looks good. When we add accessibility tests to it, though, the test is failing. And we can have the assertions that have failed, the issues that were caught, noted in the event log. Upon selecting one of those, the offending element of the component is highlighted. Even in the case of multiple elements breaking a certain rule, all will be shown in the rendered component. One thing to note here about this rendered side, this is not a screenshot. So Cypress brings up the actual web elements, and when you go through the event log to an earlier point in time, if you click on the event log at the moment the button was rendered before it was clicked, the rendered button also is not a screenshot. It actually brings you back to the state of that component at that point in time. And you can, along the way, manually interact with it and test it and keep working on it. Now, an alternative to this approach with Cypress X plugin is the X Watcher. The X Watcher is a much more plug-and-play solution and has a couple of notable differences. Most important one being that you get the actual reports hosted on a web page somewhere, notably on the X Developer Hub, and that it is more maintainable in the long run, in the sense that it doesn't require per test edits of the code, but we'll talk about that a bit more down the line. At the time of this presentation, X Watcher runs in Chrome browser only and should be used with Cypress run mode. Now, there is another disclaimer here that X Watcher at the moment is not functioning with Cypress Component Testing, but I'm looking forward to being able to announce that it is. And due to the sheer simplicity of the setup that the tool brings, we'll have a look at it here as well. First step is registering on the X Developer Hub page. You are similar to the Cypress guided setup. You're giving specific tests, able to choose the framework you're plugging into. And once you have decided on a project name, you're given an API key. This API key is your unique hook between your code and the reports on the X Developer Hub. Setting this all up in the next steps is installing the X Watcher package. With the X Watcher package installed, we need to do a bit of editing of the Cypress configuration. Another one of the under the hood files, a different one than we used with the previous method, but still something fairly simple. And the only necessary thing here is defining the API key so that the code knows where to send the data. After this is done, we would import the Xcore Watcher into Cypress Engine itself Unlike with CypressX, what I mentioned on the test files or per test specific edits, this happens only once. So this is an edit you add to a file and to a certain file, and it executes after each of your tests. This command gathers the data and forwards it to the developer hub. With the code setup being done, all that's left is to run a test suite and have it appear on the developer hub page. The developer hub also holds a history of previous test runs. So you can go through the trends of changing data as you go through fixing specific issues. Each of the runs displayed here has a detailed overview as well, showing the number of issues split up by their severity and by how recent are they. Did those issues appear in this run, for example? And in its lower part, the issues are listed themselves with specific pointers to what are the offending elements. Now, this here isn't an example template code. These are the exact selectors to your web element in your code. And it provides information on how to resolve these issues. Most importantly, it links to DQ University pages on the specific, in this case, on the color contrast issue and how to fix it. On a subsequent run, after remediating issues, we can notice the total number of issues found is less, and there is a listed change of -1. Along that, on the run summary page, we can filter the issues by their impact, by the WCAG level that they belong to. So when looking at a certain compliance level, and the most useful one for me is the new issues filter. So is this something that I've made happen in this run with my code? As well, we could export all of this data in a JSON or a CSV format for further processing. Now, looking at these two tools, the focus here is bringing quick results to the table. AxeWatcher takes really low effort to set up, and it brings immediate value, especially for teams that don't have a dedicated resource or don't have enough of the resource dedicated towards QA and maintenance. A solution like this makes it viable to have an ongoing testing without having to pick through test files on each run. Another important feature here is that the AxeWatcher can be also plugged in as a GitHub action. So this can be used to block merging of code that doesn't pass your accessibility requirements and link to the specific reports on the code that on the feature that is being merged. With Cypress Component Testing, speed is the keyword, definitely. The duration of these tests are measured in milliseconds and is incredibly quicker to bring results than, for example, end-to-end testing, even in Cypress as well. With accessibility checks active, this is increased to seconds, but still speed is of the essence. Due to the state of isolated components, due to the slightly artificial environment, there are additional considerations to have when building out your tests, basically. But it also allows for precise control over the elements tested and over the conditions a web component is in the moment of looking at it. With this in mind, with this granularity and isolated ecosystem, we can have a look at a common problem in QA, which is flaky tests. What we call flaky tests are tests that are sometimes failing. We like to blame it on solar radiation, but it's usually not, and it's a sign of a test not built well. Cypress Component Testing, by its nature, guides you toward asserting a state of a web component, making sure it has reached the exact point you want to look at before triggering some checks or test assertions. It gives you the control, basically. Another thing on the Cypress component testing note is lightning fast tests make new issues. Something that wouldn't be an issue with end-to-end testing, for example, is having your fonts not load before you check a button, check an element. This is something that happens all the time in Cypress component testing. So one more vote of confidence for the practice of assert the desired state of your component. So make sure it's built properly, trigger the check, and then you really know what you're working with. This minimizes the chance of flakiness. And this also works really well with accessibility checks. So once more, going back to the Cypress X plugin and its approach, this gives you the solution for that issue of having a certain accessibility check trigger behind 5 actions, behind different conditions. You can reach those conditions and then confirm that the accessibility issue is resolved. There is an honorable mention here. Since we are talking about shifting left and moving test reports as soon as possible in your development process, the earliest possible point is the X accessibility linter developed by DQ as well. It is free to use as a VS Code extension, as far as I know, and it is something that can discern those issues that can be discovered from the static code and highlight them at the moment of writing that code itself. To go over the experiences of using these tools in practice, it is important to keep in mind that this is not a replacement for full accessibility audits. This is not a replacement. This is not the full solution. This is something to go hand in hand with your other testing methods, and these accessibility tests, and in general, accessibility tests have value if acted upon. So use these results. With Cypress component testing once more, there is less coverage of issues caught than for end-to-end tests, for example. But those issues that are caught are shifted sooner, and you can react on them during the component build-out. This helps keep the accessibility on the developer's mind. So it goes into the proper process, building out the accessibility culture. It supports having accessibility not as something to be dealt with after a feature has been built out and prepared for shipping, but something as an integral part of the workflow. Also, the approach with Cypress and with having the components visually rendered. So unlike with unit tests where it would be simulated in a browser environment, this is actually there. You can actually click on it, and it makes things much more interactive, both during development and during discussion between designers, accessibility champions, and developers. It helps provide a playground which can be used to move from theory into practice and to have quick confirmation of certain fixes and certain design changes. For example, we've had sessions with this running alongside, and every quick edit of a component reruns the test in a second, and you can immediately verify that the issue was overcome or precisely define what to do as the next steps. One more thing about the component isolation. Cypress Component Testing isn't designed just to look at the most basic building blocks. This isn't something to render only buttons and drop-downs. You get to choose the scope. So looking at something like a navigation bar with multiple elements, or a modal, or any basically complex modular section of web elements, you pick what to render in the browser. And this gives you the precision tools for targeting from the basic elements upwards, from targeting interactions, segments of, for example, like a navigation bar, having that navigation bar rendered and all of the little bits that arise as a problem between the elements in it interacting. Now to have a couple of keynotes here, which are generally the most important takeaways from this. I used to see a lot of chasing WCAG compliance. This is not the right way to do things. WCAG compliance is the floor and not the ceiling, as I've heard recently. Generally, building out accessibility culture and having that thought of creating proper, building out proper elements in the terms of accessibility as well through the whole development process, that is the goal to strive for. With these tools, you help foster that. You help bring it closer to the people working on the elements themselves. Another thing is quicker reports, quicker fixes. Basically, bridging the gap, not having to wait for an audit or a review, but having it there for you to see if an issue is present and on how to fix it. Big mention once more, this data has value only if you act on it. If you have the report sitting in a JSON somewhere, it doesn't bring any good to the development practice. So act on the insights gained. To go over the target of these practices, these are not a replacement. these are tools to help, tools to bring you closer to accessibility. That can be a good entry point. Accessibility can look a bit scary, and if you don't know where to start from your basic elements. Start from making your elementary components accessible and build up from there. Reaching accessibility, on the other hand, takes a thorough approach. From the technical side, like using semantic HTML, area labels, and not only using them, but how well made area labels, for example, through the conceptual side of getting to know your audience, getting to know your targets, what are the audience's needs, permanent, temporary, and situational. And the final points here is there is no such thing as instant accessibility. Quick solutions do have a purpose in testing and in issue detection. They do not give good remediation. They do not give good fixes. They usually hide the issues instead of repairing them. It is an important effort. It is an important thing to strive for, to have the accessibility grow from within. This is not a small thing, but you can start small. You can start by picking away at the roots of your web application. This pretty much concludes my presentation. There are a couple of resources linked here, like the WCAG documents, the documentation for the tools that we've mentioned, like Xcore and Cypress Component Testing, and another reference to what are the things that X Developer Hub can do and what it aims to cover. Thank you so much for having me here. I think you've heard how excited I am during this presentation, and it was a lovely ride. Thank you.
Great job, Milos. Attendees love the content and have actually a lot of questions. So I'm excited. If you're ready to answer some, well, we can get
Sure thing.
started.
I'm happy to hear that.
Awesome. And we have plenty of time. So if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A section. But I'm going to go based off of popularity first and go from there. First question is, how do these Axe-Core tests with Cypress differ from the Axe-Core tests you would run with another framework such as Jest, React, or Puppeteer? Is there a reason why you would choose one over another?
With Cypress Component Testing, there is a difference because over Jest, for example, you have the actual rendered element. The thing that's good to know here to kind of expand on the scope of the question is if you're looking at what framework to choose to add accessibility on, start with what you have. So basically, the simpler you can make your job with starting on this, the better. But for me, Cypress Component Testing brings exactly that interactivity and practical discussion moment with being able to show the elements, click on them, act on them, and do that during a live session.
Awesome. Another one here is, how did you deal with Axe-Core due to their plan to not support React 18? Any useful alternatives to Axe-Core you worked with? I will let you answer, but I can also provide an alternative to that.
Feel free to. I'll give a thought afterwards.
Okay, so the alternative to utilizing Xcore would actually be, my assumption would be to use the X Watcher. It does something very similar to what the React API does. So feel free to go through the slides and take a look at the link for the Axe Watcher extension, as well as Developer Hub. Did an amazing job going through the ins and outs of DevHub as well as Axe Watcher for that.
I believe you've covered what there is to say. I mean, look at the methods that you have available, and one of them to highlight definitely is the Watcher. Yeah.
Awesome. Here's one. My team is working on a feature that doesn't yet have product accessibility requirements, and we have limited time resources. However, since our project already has Cypress infrastructure set up, and we want to push for accessibility testing in the early stages, what tools between the ones you presented would you recommend for us?
Okay, this is a fun one. First things first, the fact that you don't have accessibility requirements only means that you don't have them now. This is something that can change from the customer side and should change if it doesn't from the customer side from yours. It is plugging into the part of the talk about making a better development flow. The accessibility practices do help you, stuff like semantic HTML, do help you build better products. I would recommend dealing with accessibility from the get-go, and especially if you have Cypress already set up, then this short tutorial can be halved and you get the first reports. So go for it, is my answer.
So I like that. Another one here says, I'm sorry if I missed it, but is Watcher running accessibility issues for every page visited and its varying states throughout your existing test, or does it only capture accessibility on the last page? But I'm going to pair that with an additional question here with, does Axe Watcher work for end-to-end tests as well? If so, does it continually check throughout the test flow or only at the start, end, and somewhere else?
To pick that end-to-end part of the question and go back to my disclaimer at the middle of the talk, it currently runs only with Cypress end-to-end testing. I'm looking forward to the moment where we overcome the issue that's making it not function with component testing at the moment. That being covered, it does go through your use flow with accessibility assertions. One difference between the Axe Watcher and the Cypress X approach is that with Cypress X you have more things to think about, but also more control over where to screenshot it. And Michael, do give a thought on that question as well, please.
No,
Since I know you've been working with the X Watcher.
Yes. So being a developer on the product team for this, it's great to see it being used. Milos did an amazing job demonstrating it and all of the instances that it does. Axe Watcher does do end-to-end testing. It's fairly small as far as the amount of code that you have to add for the output that you get with how much accessibility testing you have to do. It does end-to-end because it goes through each page state and workflow. There's no start to end. It's consistently running. So I hope that answered some of that question.
I'll add a bit to that might have caused the initial confusion. The point where you include Axe Watcher to Cypress testing is in an after each step executed after each test file runs. But it is only the point where you gather the data and push it forwards. It is not the point of triggering the check, unlike with the Cypress X, where you have a command for triggering the observation, triggering the accessibility check itself.
Yes. Cool. Another one here said, would it be possible to set up Cypress with Axe to test web accessibility for Craft CMS?
I cannot answer that one at the moment because I have to look into Craft CMS to know a bit more. But I'll happily leave a ping on LinkedIn as soon as I have the answer.
Awesome. The says instant accessibility doesn't work, but what do you recommend when starting with a large application with a long way to go to be accessible?
Exactly the final couple of slides, start picking away at it. It's not going to become accessible by itself. It does require thorough work, and it can be scary when just starting out. But you're not the first team to have this problem. You won't be the last. It's just about taking those first steps with tools like this, like X Watcher and the Cypress X setup. It's easy to get those first couple of steps in, and then you just keep stepping.
And last one here, is the test feedback quite stable? What's been your experience of refixing issues that break because your tolerance changes or issues keep being reintroduced?
The test feedback is, in my experience, quite stable, but with component tests more than end-to-end tests, you might get the reintroduction of issues a bit more often just due to, or rather, when you're building out your design system, for example, you'll get the issues more often, but not on the other end of that spectrum. Basically, reappearing issues are something that can be also tracked through the developer hub, for example, and go with the DQ University solutions for each of those issues and go through them. Having them reappearing after all of those efforts might indicate a need to change something in the development process.
Awesome. And just a bonus one here. I did link the accessibility linter extension to VS Code within the chat. So please feel free to click on that to download the accessibility linter. In that, there was a question if there was a version for IntelliJ IDE. For us, just a bonus here. DQ is working on that. And hopefully will be out shortly. So please stay tuned for any additional updates on that. And with that, I'd like to thank Milos for a great session. A friendly reminder, you can continue our conversation on the community Discord. If you haven't already, you can join us via the link posted in the chat. Please be sure to also share your experience on social using the hashtag AxeCon. Enjoy the rest of AxeCon, everyone.
Enjoy. Bye.